Hello, my name is Hayden Collingham, and this is my project 2 for Classical Archaeology 221. So the question that I chose for this project was question number 2, and it is, what does the archaeological evidence for ritual practice and religious space suggest about the ways in which worship of the gods changed during the period covered by this part of the course? What does this evidence indicate about some of the social roles that religious ritual developed during that period? And my claim for this is that archaeological evidence for ritual practices and religious spaces suggests that during the period between 1100 to 500 BCE, the worship of gods became much more important to the people of Greece. This evidence indicates that religious rituals became an important part of life as sacrifices were made to certain gods, along with cities beginning to adopt gods. The first piece of evidence that I want to go over for this is actually the Temple of Hera at Samos. I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry if it isn't. The Temple of Hera at Samos is a good example of how the worship of gods became more important to the Greeks over this period of time. So on the left, I actually have a picture of the plan of the Temple of Hera at Samos. It's a little bit messy. It might be hard to see, but I'll just point out the important parts as we go. So on the left, the first temple of Hera at Samos can be seen in the black outline in the picture to the left. It measured roughly 35.5 meters by 6.7 meters and dates to around 800 BCE. So as you can see right here, right by the little number 6, that would have been the altar at the original Temple of Hera, and then right here, number 10, is like a roofed colonnade that would have been there originally. And then the fourth Temple of Hera can be seen in the purple outline in the picture, and it measured about 110 meters by 55.4 meters and was built around 530 BCE. This is a drastic increase in size in only about 300 years, which is, I mean, it's crazy to see how large they were able to build this after just 300 years. So as you can see on the left, right here is the Temple of Hera. It's, I believe it's called the Large Temple of Hera, which is not very original, but it gets the job done. And so you can see how, compared to this colonnade and even this altar, this is a large space. You know, it still has another colonnade right there. It's got some smaller temples, probably dedicated to other gods, but the main temple right here to Hera is ginormous. So some of the reasons why that might account for this increase in size, it could be that the Greeks in this area just wanted the biggest temple. This is a maybe for me on plausibility, and the reason why is because it's a very simple explanation for what is likely a very complicated answer. Another reason could be that they wish to see how big they could build their temples using new technology that they developed. And again, this is a maybe. It's true that the new technology during this period allowed for them to build larger temples, but if there were no real reason to build them this large, they would not, because of the amount of manpower and resources and time that it takes to do so. It would make no sense if it would just sit there with no purpose. So my guess, honestly, is just a mix of both. But we'll never truly know because we can't just go back in time and ask them. So it's very likely that during this period of time, the Greeks started to build their temples as large as they could to show off their increased worship and dedication to their gods. Which makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because for them, they probably thought the bigger the space, the more people could go there, or the more dedications could be held, or even just, you know, the gods would like to see a large temple dedicated to them, and maybe they would want the biggest one. My next piece of evidence I want to go over is sculpture evidence, and I want to talk about some Kore and Kurus. So I picked out three Kore and Kurus. So the first one on the left is the Nakandre Kore, which is from about 640 BCE, and it's from Delos. In the middle, I have the Ischus Kurus, which is from 580 to 570 BCE at Samos, at the Temple of Hera that we just went over. And then on the right side is the Peplos Kore, which is from about 530 BCE in the Athenian Acropolis. So on the left, the Nakandre Kore, that's from a sanctuary to Apollo, and it's at one of the temples of Aphrodite. And it also has an inscription on it, actually dedicating it to Apollo. It was about 1.75 meters tall, and it was like 20 centimeters thick. In the middle there's the Ischus Kurus, which is from the sanctuary of Hera at Samos, the one that we just went over. It also has an inscription on the left thigh, and it's not dedicating it to a specific god, but it's saying that it's dedicated from a person, which is interesting because that makes it seem like it's very important to that person, that people know that they were the one that dedicated this to a god or to a temple. And that's actually about 4.75 meters tall, which is very large for many of these kurus and kore. It was odd to see one that large, actually. And then on the right, there's the peplos kore. It's from the Sanctuary of Athena. It's in the contrapposto pose, which is a style of sculpture that became very popular in later Greek sculpture. And a lot of people claim that this is actually a figure of Artemis because of like these animal figures that you get when you look at the kore under a specific light. What does this really show, though? The introduction of kurus and kore into the worship of gods shows that there was an increase in the importance of worship. Before the kore and kurus, there were not many of these large dedications, often funded by a single person. There were group dedications, certainly, and also group worship, but this is different from that. This is singular people making dedications to the god of their choice, and sometimes even modeling the kurus or kore in the figure of that god. Worship has become more personal to the person, as well as more public, with grand temples and dedications to show off. My last piece of evidence is actually artifact evidence. It's a piece of pottery. It is Attic black figure amphora by the Amasis painter from Athens in 530 BCE. And on the left side, there is an image showing the countryside Maenads and Dionysus. And then on the right side, you can actually see Athena and Poseidon, two of the chief deities in Athens on the Acropolis. What does this show, though? The first thing this shows is the adoption of gods by certain cities. So it highlights two of Athens' chief gods, Poseidon and Athena. And these were gods that were sort of meant to be like the most worshipped in a city, even if that's like a bad way to put it. They would be very important to that city's history. So many Athenian myths are based around these two gods, actually. And for that, they would usually have two of the larger temples within the city. It also shows household worship, because in the past it was not uncommon to see small items and even pottery decorated with gods. But during this period of time, it seems to become a lot more common. It seems like a lot of painters are focusing specifically on painting these gods, or even like the heroes that are sons of gods. And then the last part is naming. And it's not to say that the gods in the past did not already have names at this time, or that they weren't able to tell them apart. But it seems that, like, during this period of time, that the Greeks put a lot of emphasis on making sure that the viewer understood who is who through more than just their artistic style and maybe different symbols that they put on them. So if we go back to look, we can actually see Athena's name and Poseidon's name right above them on that, and you can also see Dionysus right over there. And this is an interesting phenomenon because it seems as if this would have helped not only in their storytelling, but also if somebody was unfamiliar with a specific figure, they could just look at the name and know who it was. My conclusion, so archaeological evidence from the period 1100 to 500 BCE suggests that religious practices and religion in general became a much more important aspect of life for the people in Greece. Ritual practices and religious spaces indicate that the worship of the gods increased drastically and that cities began to adopt specific gods and consider them to be important figures in the history of that city.